there's two questions there. I'm going to briefly discuss them and address them using timber as the context. But do we want to have a city like Shanghai where we actually live in terms of high rise and alleged sustainable buildings? But are they actually sustainable? Or can we afford to continue in the manner that we are actually going in? And for me, as someone who's come from the construction industry and served an apprenticeship as a carpenter, I have a great affinity with wood, and I actually wanted to share with people and encourage people to actually consider timber as an option, because we are impacting on our environments. The statistics are there. I don't have slides with the actual detail in terms of what the scientists and the researchers are telling us, but certainly the evidence is there, and already in our seeds environment over the last few days, last day and today, we've already seen evidence from people in terms of actually what's happening. But we have an obligation to leave the planet in a better state than we found it, and that's one of my beliefs in terms of where I'm coming from. In terms of the presentation, going to set the context, offer some definitions around sustainability, sustainable cities and green buildings, look at examples of mass timber, and just share with you some of the pioneering and excellent work that actually is going on around the world. And then hopefully we'll actually have time for questions. So what's happening globally in terms of policy and policy and building codes, etc. Well, research tells us buildings play a dominant role in clean energy transition. You can see there, building construction and operations account for 36% of the global final energy use and nearly 40% of energy related usages. So buildings and the built environment plays a huge role. The global building sector energy use continues to grow. So there's evidence of that. Buildings and construction sector emissions appear to have leveled off since 2015. However, we're still actually, going upwards in terms of our CO2 emissions. So what is it can we do in relation to that, and how can we actually move things around? The global dialogue is supporting progress. Certainly, countries are looking at their policies and changing their policies. The effects of the UN sustainability goals, for example, and its impact, the effects of sharing knowledge around what's happening from the researchers is certainly impacting on where we're going. And building codes and certification policies are changing and are being affected. For me, looking at North America, I would regard North America at the moment as really making great inroads into actually transitioning to using timber, mass timber in particular, as a means to be more sustainable, to be more reactive to the climate agenda. And lots of states within the US are actually changing their building code to actually include mass timber as a solution, where heretofore they actually didn't. And there's certainly investment in more energy efficient ways of constructing buildings. So that's just an overview. And I suppose COVID has impacted on all of this, but I'm not going to actually discuss that today in terms of where we're going. Sustainable cities, and what do we mean? So a definition coming from the World Green Building Council. And I suppose I've highlighted there, wherever possible, renewable resources are used instead of non-renewable resources. And the image below there shows the sidewalk labs there in Toronto, where Google were investing a huge amount of money. They've since pulled out, but the project still remains going ahead. And again, it's an effort by a community to actually try and impact and change in relation to using more renewable sources and creating an environment that actually works for people. Green buildings, what are they? I suppose, unfortunately, You can see the building at the bottom. Just move that aside there. So what is a green building? And again, the World Green Building Council give a definition of what it is there. A green building is a building that in its design, construction or operation reduces or eliminates negative impacts and can create positive impacts on our climate and natural environment. Green buildings preserve precious natural resources and improve our quality of life. So that's what the aspirational views in terms of green building from the World Green Building Council. The building on the bottom there is our central bank in Dublin, and again that is regarded as a very, very a green building. And again, comparing it to the image, the architect's impression in the building up on the right there, where we see greenery around, and a comparison between those may not evidently give, that the building on the top is actually more green than the one on the bottom. But again, we need to be thinking about how it is we impact on our environment in terms of those buildings. Apologies. So timber as a solution then. Well, timber is now being allowed, and building codes are taking effect in relation to actually building high rise. And you can see there, and I'll give some examples of where we're going with high rise. But again, as a solution, we're now at 18 stories, where mass timber has been used in 18-story buildings around the world. And again, with research and development, architects and designers are looking at going higher. The flexibility in terms of delivering projects on time. It's modular construction. It's using prefabricated units to actually build a building. So therefore, there's actually a lot more control over the projects. And aesthetically, certainly wood is a very, very appealing to people, and the warmth that timber exudes is really a factor that actually helps people in terms of going forward. The good news is that the product in terms of timber is available. The Forest Action Organization, which is an international body, have indicated that around the world there's actually 4 billion hectares of actual timber or timber stock or wood that can be taken from those forests and used for commercial purpose. So from that point of view, it's seen in some quarters that we actually don't have the stock in terms of timber, but it's certainly in different regions around. And you can see the green areas highlighting in the world map there up down on the right. Certainly in regions around the world, we have an abundance of actual material. So that's not an issue. What is an issue is developing the strategies in order to actually maximize the use of that material and do it in a sustainable way. And the majority of the stock taken from forests nowadays, it actually comes from managed forests, where they actually get certification around the extraction of wood from the forest. Examples here, again, coming to, we have advanced not only in digital technologies, but actually in manufacturing technologies. And the slide here just demonstrates some really interesting examples of actually mass timber in use. And again, the advantage of timber is it's versatile. If you look at the image on the top right hand side there, it can be actually used with other materials in terms of its use, and connectors can be of steel or aluminium or whatever, or solid materials other than wood, to actually allow for those connections to be made. The advantage of mass timber is it can also be used as flooring and walls. And while people have a mistrust of timber in terms of fire resistance, actually timber is better in terms of fire resistance in a fire than actual steel, because timber, when it gets to 300 degrees, actually starts to char and actually in terms of the full material being actually damaged, it doesn't react to fire in the same way that exposed steel would, for example. Again, now I'm going to focus on different countries there. The image there, I just wanted to put in terms of, that's the kind of side view of a cross laminate beam. And again, you can see the makeup of it is different lats or lengths of material. And again, it's used similar to the way plywood is manufactured, in that it has layers going in alternate directions. And again, that gives us the strength and stability to be able to be used in the construction process. And because we've advanced with technology, we can now manufacture boards up to 60 feet long. Structural Lam are a company around the world, but particularly in America, and they've just recently signed off on a fabrication unit down in Texas, where they'll be able to use 65 feet panels, manufacture 65 feet panels. So again, it's an interesting area. The slide here, I'm just going to take you through a couple of regions in the US. So what we have here is that we have some data in relation to North America and where it's going. And you can see the chart on the left-hand side there. You know, the Americans by 2034 per year are looking to do 24,000 units in mass timber. Now that's a huge projection, and you can see the rise as we traverse towards 2034. But again, it's a commitment to actually building buildings through the use of mass timber. Currently, last year in 2019, there were 78 mass timber buildings constructed in the UK or in the US, and it's great to see in terms of advocating mass timber buildings. There are a number of universities in the US that have actually engaged in building mass timber buildings on campus, and I'll return to that on the next slide. The next building here on the right here is a building that's currently in construction in Milwaukee. It's going to be completed in 2021, but it's going to be actually the tallest apartment tower, a mass timber apartment tower in the US when it gets completed in 2021. They're actually out of the ground at the moment, and they have a concrete platform and then building on top of the concrete platform with the 18 stories of mass timber. So an example of the university campus buildings. This building here is a wonderful building. It's at the University of Massachusetts, just recently opened. And it actually is it's exposed mass timber structures. You can see from the image there on the right hand side, up at the right hand side. But the function of it was to actually use it as a teaching tool. So engineers and built environment students actually get access to this building, and all the exposed structures are used as a means to actually demonstrate to students in a visual way that actually how the building is actually put together. So again, as I said, universities leading the way and actually educating students around the sustainable nature in the buildings that they're actually producing and getting students to actually engage in. Moving to Australia. So Australia's largest timber engineered commercial building is in Brisbane, and again I'll just move him up there. It's designed by Bates Smart Architects, and you can see down at the bottom there the nice use and the nice design around the actual large mass timber components. But the whole building is mass timber with a glazed front. On the right then, in Sydney, the International House by Tazan Architects is a 7-story building, and it's constructed entirely of mass timber and engineered wood. And again, you know, the aesthetics of these buildings are actually really nice in terms of people's being exposed to the buildings internally and creates a comfort value. South Africa has begun to actually engage in mass timber, and I know Emma yesterday presented what's happening in South Africa. Nelson Mandela, and again linking in with universities, Nelson Mandela University are currently building the first mass timber building in South Africa, and that will come on stream in the next year or so. And again, what they're doing in South Africa is they're actually focusing on getting the expertise in from international sources in order to actually develop themselves. So there's a concerted effort from the stakeholders in terms of actually moving forward on that. Moving to Europe, Europe again. People suggest that in the 1990s, mass timber was really developed in Austria and Germany. Well, I saw an interesting discourse last week from one person who actually came across mass timber example from the 1900s. So I suppose what we have today is maybe higher square areas of mass timber rather than in the 1900s. But it is, I suppose, across Europe a material that has been used, and certainly Austria and Germany and the Scandinavian countries, because of the resources close to them and proximity of resources to them, have actually used timber for millennia. And again, this is just an example of a full large office warehouse building built entirely of wood, up in Göteborg in Sweden. And again, it's just a really good example of where we're moving to in terms of mass timber. Then the image on the right here is one of the main manufacturers of mass timber, and this is their main offices in the Tyrol, and it's the company Rotoblas, and they're doing really good work with designers and engineers in terms of actually rolling out the quality mass timber. And again, we look to countries like Austria and Germany in terms of getting that knowledge and expertise. In other parts of Europe, France in particular, the 2024 Olympics will be held in Paris. And what the president of France, Macron, has actually indicated is that 50% of buildings will be actually timber going forward. So they're working on a project, and this is the designer sketch that we have here at the moment, on a revamping of the Saint-Denis region or arrondissement in Paris, where they're actually going to house all of the Olympic Village and all of the Olympic stadia. And again, all of the buildings are actually being designed and constructed with timber in mind. And again, it's a government directive around moving to more sustainable products and sustainable manufacture in terms of the buildings. The Hyperion here was the first French residential tower built with mass timber. Again, it's a 7-story building, and it indicates where things are going. The tallest 18-story tower, and it was accredited as the tallest mass timber building just before lockdown. It's in Mosternet in Norway, and again, it's mass timber with a concrete core up through the centre. And again, the designers were very, very anxious to actually incorporate timber into the design of it. So currently, it stands as the largest mass timber tower in the world. But I'm sure as the Americans develop their processes and designs in mass timber, things will be challenged from across the water. Some EU directives have been actually put out across Europe to the member states. And again, if you look at the Austria, Finland, and France are moving ahead with their actually agendas around actually a sustainable strategy that actually addresses low carbon through wood. Not to leave out the British Isles and Ireland. So the UK experience is an example of the Vitso headquarters in Leamington Spa. And again, you can see there it's a big open space workshop area as part of the Vitso headquarters. And what strikes me here is the use of glass and timber, and the wide open spaces that can be generated with laminate timber and mass timber, and again letting light into the workspace by actually facing northwards. So again, an example that the use of mass timber is going forward. We're not without our challenges, and the challenges are will be overcome as we proceed through time. But there is, it is important to actually promote the benefits of mass timber, and certainly looking at the landscape of across the world, and the impact of COVID on how these companies do business and how we impact people's knowledge. There's been a huge amount of webinars and seminars online for people to actually develop their knowledge. And certainly in Canada and North America, there has been a huge effort by the actual wood associations to promote the use of mass timber, and that's to be welcomed. I'm not sure we're so good at it in Europe in terms of moving that forward. There is that fire resistance fear factor that needs to be addressed, and certainly again COVID has given opportunity for people to actually carry out their experimentations around fire resistance and actually share that online. So again, that message is getting out. The cost model for mass timber, and there's kind of a debate around whether it's actually cheaper or not, and it looks like from looking at the research that projects are a little bit more expensive to actually do by this method. But I do believe as we develop that cost model will come down. So again, it's about addressing those elements in terms of the cost, and actually making it less of a comparison with other means of construction, but maybe more around getting the costing right. The coding and regulations has a negative impact, and certainly for people in the UK, the effects and the response to the Grenfell tragedy. I think timber is not coming out of that well, in terms of people actually are still a bit nervous of it, and certainly the codes and the regulations coming forward may actually exclude timber in terms of actually being used in dwellings or structures over 6 stories. So that's going to be actually a real problem. Manufacturing and installation is limited. It's actually very limited in the UK and Ireland. We in Ireland have no manufacturing plants. I do believe that the more we actually discuss and engage with actually talking about it and why we should invest in it, that the time will come where we actually will get a manufacturing unit in Ireland, for example. But again, that's down to actually promoting and making sure that the community and society know the value of it. And then the whole thing of collaborative projects is a challenge. The siloed effects of the different stakeholders involved in the process. And I think one of the real advantages today is that those companies that are associated with mass timber and do the designing and do the engineering and manufacture are really getting themselves out there, engaging with architects and engineers. So again, the decision process around what type of building are being used should be challenged. The procurement process is a challenge also, and then again, it's emphasizing the common collaborative culture, as I mentioned there, it is really important. And I suppose the message really to say is that mass timber can be the solution. in terms of designing and constructing to actually address that climate agenda. Just to say, while the image there suggests communities, I just wanted to really address and mention that, well, communities are really, really important. So again, this is a Quaker community that has come together and again is working as a community to actually put a timber building together or a timber structure together. So we shouldn't rule communities out in having their impact on addressing the green future. That's my presentation. I'm open to questions and I'd love to hear what people have to say.